So you're going through the motions, you gave up the potato chips, you're going to the gym, so why is the scale still not moving? In this video, I'm going to discuss the 4 major overlooked areas of weight loss that'll help you finally release those stubborn pounds in a sustainable way that will help you maintain this lean, healthy body indefinitely. So the first commonly overlooked area is stressing over macros. This is so unnecessary and it will cause undue stress and frustration along this process. Weight loss doesn't have to feel restrictive and uncomfortable. It just has to be maintained in small increments long enough to reach your goal. Studies also show that regardless of the macronutrient content, you will lose or gain the same amount of weight regardless, all depending on the amount of calories you're consuming. So this does not mean a high-fat diet or a high-protein diet is considered ideal for health. It just means that if you're trying to lose weight, you can lose weight with any variation of macronutrient content, any degree of protein, any degree of fat, and any degree of carbohydrate, as long as they are within a similar calorie content. So I hope that makes sense. People lose the same amount of weight regardless of the macronutrient ratio. So if you want to maintain health, however, while losing the weight, then it's important to maintain about an 80-10-10 breakdown when it comes to 80% carbohydrate. And these are whole natural carbohydrates, not sugar, not pastries, not pizza. This would include things like legumes, grains, starches of other sorts, as well as vegetables, fruit. These have complex carbohydrates. You notice how all the healthiest foods on the planet contain carbohydrates? They're designed that way for a reason. So secondly, you want to maintain about 10% of your fats and your protein. Those are actually much higher ranges than are necessary for our health, but it's just easier to break them down that way. And people are typically already consuming a really high fat, high protein diet when they try to transition to a whole plant food diet. So it's just easier for them to maintain those levels of 80-10-10 than it is to go any more minimally, because you have so many of these preconceived notions and dietary ideals and paradigms that we have been taught and brainwashed since we were children in our public school systems and in the advertising and in social media. So just acknowledge that this is going to be a difficult shift, but all plant foods have a very similar breakdown, except things, the super high fat ones like the avocados, the nuts and seeds, and olives and coconut. These are out of the norm. So these are going to be much higher in fat when it comes to the macronutrient breakdown. But the majority of foods, things like grains and fruits and vegetables, legumes, these all have a very similar carbohydrate, protein, fat ratio. So it's very easy to get your macros in the right ratio when you're eating a plant-based diet because they're already in the right ratio. You don't have to go out of your way to combine certain foods or make sure you're getting enough of this. All of them have the right ratio breakdown of macronutrients. So stop stressing about it. You don't have to follow a high-fat diet or a high-protein diet. You don't even have to follow a high-carbohydrate diet. Just follow a natural plant-based diet and the rest takes care of itself. So inadvertently, the second portion of the solution is to reduce your stress level. This will allow you to get into better contact with your satiety and hunger mechanisms, but also it'll allow you to metabolize fat more efficiently. You don't have so much circulating cortisol in your bloodstream. So it's going to be much more beneficial to maintain a more relaxed, neutral perspective when it comes to food instead of overemphasizing some sort of macronutrient perfectionism. So this next area might sound straightforward, but you would be surprised how many people are over-consuming calories and not recognizing it. So yes, the second area is simply eating too many calories. So many times I'll be working with people that don't fully grasp the concept of calorie density. So we're no longer counting calories. That is long past. That's from the 80s and 90s. We're over that decade. So now we are focusing on calorie density because it's such a better method for tracking your intake on a given day or over a week, whatever time span you're looking at. It's so much more feasible than trying to keep track of specific amounts. So when you are using calorie density, you're simply categorizing the amounts and the types of food that you're putting into a meal by how many calories are within a given pound of food generally. So you're just thinking the non-starchy vegetables are going to be about 100 pounds, and then the fruits are going to be about 200 to 300 calories per pound, and then you have your starchy vegetables, which are more about 400 calories, and leading up to the legumes and the grains ultimately at about 5 to 600. And then you have your nuts and seeds and your high-fat foods that I mentioned earlier, the avocados, the olives, the coconut. These are things that you want to eat minimally. So the higher up in calorie density, the lower quantity and volume of food you'll be consuming. So lots of non-starchy vegetables, small quantities of nuts and seeds, decent portion of the grains, legumes, non-starchy vegetables, and of course the fruit. So I hope that is helpful breaking down the calorie density. So it's important to acknowledge that even though you're eating a super clean plant-based diet, you can be eating way too many calories. So many influencers and plant-based advocates, which they're fabulous, and it's all good because of the message that they're sending out, but at the same time, the message of you can eat as much as you want, that's not doing us any favors because you cannot eat as much as you want, but you can eat as much as you want within these parameters. So as long as you're following the principles of calorie density, yes, you can eat until you are satisfied. I hope that makes intuitive sense because when we're eating as much as we want on a hyper-palatable diet, we are eating well above our caloric needs. But when we eat as much as we want on a plant-based diet, you're well within your caloric needs because so many of these foods are calorie dilute because of all the water and fiber contained within them, as long as you're not processing them in any way. Another important note is that exercise does increase our calorie needs, but not by much. You don't need to go crazy, and you certainly don't need to look for excess protein in your diet if you are an athlete. It comes naturally with simply eating more calories to meet the additional requirements after a given workout session. So again, the solution is to follow the principles of calorie density and continue diluting your calories with high fiber, high water foods. So high fiber is obviously plants because they can't come from animals, and high water means you're not processing them, or at least not overly processing them. So keep those two factors in mind and you will meet your weight loss goals in no time. So the third often overlooked area where people tend to take in too many calories and continue gaining weight annually is simply by eating irregular meals. Meal consistency is so much more important than people recognize because there needs to be some sort of boundaries and parameters around what we're eating on a given day and when we're eating those foods on a given day. The more you can sync your meals within a consistent time frame, the easier it is to keep track of what you ate in the first place. But also, it's important to align all of your circadian rhythms with your meal timing because digesting and eating food is actually a means of signaling to our body that it's daytime, we're awake, it's time to function, it's time to have a lot of energy. So if you're eating well into the night, you're not going to get great sleep, you're going to eat poorly the next day, you're probably not going to want to exercise because you feel like crap. It's just not a good cycle. But also, it's important to maintain this meal timing consistency because you'll recognize that you no longer need calories late in the night when you are burning them off at a less efficient rate to begin with. Nobody needs to be snacking right before they're going to bed. Nobody needs that last burst of energy right before bed. And you have plenty of energy. That's what all the stored fat on your body is. Lots of stored energy. So don't ever feel like you need to hurry up and get a meal in before bedtime because you need energy or you are going to the gym so you quick need a protein shake to get you through your workout. It doesn't work that way. We are energy storing machines. We are incredibly efficient at doing that. That is why we have such a problem holding on to excess weight. So snacking actually increases our desire to eat and encourages overconsumption. So the more you can keep your meals consistent and within those meal times, instead of meals, snacks, snacks, then you can maintain this rest and digest period where you are anabolic, catabolic. The catabolic phase when you're using those calories and the anabolic stage when you are storing those calories. Regular meal times is also important for maintaining your hunger and satiety mechanisms. If we are not truly hungry, we should not be eating. And the only way to become truly hungry is to stop eating long enough to build those natural hunger drives. So by cutting your meals off earlier in the evening, you will ensure that you will be hungry for breakfast. And then cutting your snacks off after breakfast will ensure a hearty healthy lunch. And then again, cutting your snacks off until dinner will ensure that you will have a nice light dinner because you'll probably have eaten plenty of starchy, whole food, plant-based meals for breakfast and lunch. So by the time you get to dinner, it'll be just simply a small, delicious, plant-based meal to hold you over until the following morning. People wonder why it's so hard to transition to a healthier diet when they don't stop snacking, because if you don't let your hunger drive build, those meals will not taste very good. You will never get to a point where your senses are so heightened that raw vegetables are truly satiating. So by all means, hunger is the best sauce. Just let it work to your advantage. And if you are snacking between meals, it simply means you didn't eat a large enough or satisfying enough meal at your last meal. So trying to figure out how much we need, but also of what types of foods we need, and making a balanced, nutritious, plant-based meal is really important. So getting enough starchy foods like the legumes, the potatoes, sweet potatoes, the squashes or the grains, those are what is going to fill you up and make you satiated from one meal to the next without snacking in between. So ultimately, the solution to getting rid of your irregular eating patterns is to simply create these balanced, wholesome, satisfying meals regularly throughout each day as much as possible. You don't have to get super rigid about this, as long as it's on a most days of the week basis. That's what we're looking for. This is what's going to allow you to get in better contact with your satiety and hunger mechanisms, so you're not constantly overshooting your calories day after day after day. Your body will naturally tell you how much you need. Instead of craving your potato chips or your sweets, you're just going to want to maintain your healthy, balanced, plant-based meals. The fourth commonly overlooked area when it comes to weight loss is dining out too much. Our culture, and so many cultures, are so focused on having other people create their meals for them. And inevitably, this leads to the overuse of things like salt, sugar, and oil, which are going to maintain that annual weight gain year after year after year. So it's great to be a social butterfly, but there are so many ways to interact with people and enjoy relationships without sitting down for a meal at a greasy restaurant every single time that you are engaging with each other. So some great options instead of following suit with the typical members of our society. It's helpful to invite people over to your home for a meal. People forget that we used to do that as a culture back in the day. Now it's all about going out to eat and spending way too much money on junk food. Like, it doesn't even taste good the majority of the time. I don't know how it got started in the first place. Yes, the ambiance and the atmosphere, that's all wonderful. But really, when it comes down to it, I couldn't imagine eating that way all day, every day like I used to. It just is not pleasurable anymore. I prefer eating my own foods. So if you could bring people to your home, and whether or not they want you to cater to their eating preferences or your eating preferences, maybe you can introduce them to some new foods. Maybe they'll get curious about your meals, but you definitely don't have to force anything on them. I'm just saying you can control more of these aspects when it comes to your diet by allowing people to come to your home to eat a meal. If you're spending enough time with somebody where it, overlaps enough of a duration where you're going to want to spend time eating a meal together. Or if you're just hanging out for a shorter period of time, then you don't really have to worry about this. But it's important to find ways to spend time with people that don't involve food. So outdoor activities are a great go-to. I know it's freezing outside right now, so that's not too much of an option, unless you go to like an indoor skating rink or skiing or something fun like that. But otherwise, you can go hiking when it's nice out. That's always my favorite go-to. Kayaking, canoeing, any kind of water sports, boating. Keep in mind that there are so many fun activities, painting, pottery. You can take classes with people, exercise classes. There are so many ways to interact and make friends and maintain relationships without having it revolve around a restaurant or a fast food table every time you see each other. These businesses do not have your health in mind. They are trying to make money. They don't care whether or not these foods are good for you. All they want is to keep you coming back. So in order to do that, they have to be way hyper palatable and super high in calories. Some of these meals are upwards of like 3,500, 4,000 calories. That's enough to feed you for 2 days. That is ridiculous. No wonder we're having such a hard time releasing all of this excess fat on our body. We are set up for failure in this culture, unfortunately, in this point in time. I'm hoping things will start shifting more into a health promoting favor soon. But for now, we have to create these systems and parameters around our day-to-day functions in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle. It's just the way it is. So ultimately, if you do decide to go out, and that's perfectly fine, there's always going to be an instance where you would just rather dine out with people, or that's where the event is and you don't want to be left out of that, of course. So yes, by all means, we are going to dine out, but there are smart ways of doing this. Number one, you want to eat a satisfying meal before you go, something with lots of starch to keep you feeling full. So things like, again, the potatoes, the legumes, the grains, and the squashes. Then you can order something small at the restaurant if you choose to, like a small salad. You can bring your own dressing, or you can ask for some lemon to season your food instead of the oil-based dressings that they have at the restaurant. You can also order sides and specify, how were these made? Can you leave out this? Can you add this? Don't feel too shy or too embarrassed to order what you truly want, because that's what they're there for. That's the service. You would do the same thing if you were eating a standard American diet style meal and asking for certain accommodations. It's just a little more awkward because nobody else is asking for the same accommodations we are. But you'll get over that. The more you practice, the easier this becomes. So stand up for yourself and stand up for your health and order what's right. And also see if you can control which restaurant you go to, because that's always helpful too. And if you can't, feel free to call ahead of time, talk to the manager, talk to the chef, figure out what foods you can and cannot bring with you, or what foods you can alter in any way, or what might they have that can accommodate you. The other factor is, this is where a lot of people give in to eating foods that they really don't want to, simply because they feel pressured by others. So by all means, if people are tempting you and making you feel vulnerable and uncomfortable, maybe it's better to refrain from these types of activities or those types of relationships, at least until you have gotten your feet wet in the plant-based realm and you feel more comfortable being assertive and making these decisions. So if you are struggling in this area, make sure you click the link in the description box below. I created this awesome tool. It's called the Food Pushers Response Guide. And it is just like it sounds. If you're having issues with people pushing, or even seemingly well-meaningful people are going to offer you certain things, and then they're going to ask questions about why you replied the way you did, why are you not eating this way, you used to always eat this way. There are 26 tactful yet assertive ways to respond to people who are asking these questions and offering these foods to you, and that will leave you in a manner where it doesn't impact your relationship with the person, and you can stand up for yourself and move on. So make sure you download that resource in the link below. All right, guys, I hope these tips were helpful. It is such a real struggle in this society trying to lose weight or maintain healthy weight loss, or just maintain a lean, healthy body to begin with. So if you need more support around this issue, feel free to reach out for a free consultation. And I'll leave a video right here that you can watch next on navigating the social aspects of a plant-based diet if you are more interested in learning about that. And I will see you in the next one.